Shut up and sit down.
Hey everybody, this is Cliff Taylor. Today we're going to poke the bear, and the bear we're going to poke today is police unions and their barrier to affecting meaningful change in law enforcement. So imagine if before interrogating a suspect, police officers had to provide the suspect with a written statement from all of the witnesses with knowledge of the crime. Now imagine if prior to conducting that interrogation, police officers were also required to provide suspects and their attorneys with a full and truthful accounting of all the evidence against them. And imagine if police were also required to provide all of this information and advance notice to the suspect and their attorneys of anywhere from 24 hours to 10 days in length before they were allowed to conduct an interrogation. Now, most experienced police officers would completely balk at such a hindrance in their ability to interrogate criminal suspects. They might understandably tell you that such limitations would make it unreasonably difficult to elect incriminating statements from suspects, which would all be true. But these are just a handful of the procedural requirements that many union contracts promise to the police officers during internal investigations. And many of the collective bargaining agreements across the country have significant limitations on the interrogations of police officers. See, New York City has 5 different police unions. It has a police union for the regular cops. It has a police union for their sergeants. It has a police union for their detectives. It has a police union for the lieutenants. And it has a separate police union for the captains. That's 5 different organizations that can get in the way or can use their power to stop any meaningful change. So New York's the largest police department in the country. Second is Chicago, and then Los Angeles, and then Philadelphia, and then Houston. And there's just so many police officers, and there's so many different unions. It's a patchwork. There isn't one union that covers everybody, or even one union for all beat cops, one union for all sergeants. It's all of these different unions all over the place, and they all use their power to facilitate protecting their members, because that's what a union is supposed to do. A union is supposed to protect its members from their employer. It's supposed to be that stopgap between letting a employer run roughshod over its employees, and that's a good thing at times. But what has happened is when the employer's job is to protect the populace, then that populace includes cops and includes their own members, and there's definitely a differential in power when the power dynamic is definitely really off for this. So even when an officer gets disciplined, over 70% of the collective bargaining agreements in the country allow for officers to appeal it to an arbiter. And this arbiter's decision overrides any disciplinary action that's been put on them from supervisors, police officials, and even civilian review boards. And these contracts often stipulate that the arbiter is chosen by the union. And that's like having the home team say, hey, you know what, we need referees. Hey, they're our most diehard fans. We're going to take those guys, and they're going to be the referees today. It'll be a fair game. And the power of police unions spreads even farther than that. Police unions, they create political action committees or PACs, and these committees, they donate to DA's offices or to DA campaigns and state senators and state representatives, county commissioners, aldermen, state attorney generals. All of them have money that are donated for their political campaigns from these police unions. And they do that to keep the power that they have and to strengthen their stranglehold on the system. And on top of all that, membership is often compulsory in nearly every municipality in the country. To better understand how this power has been abused in the past, we can look at Chicago in the 1980s. A cash-strapped Chicago had been primarily concerned with holding a really tight bottom line and wanted to avoid significant increases in salaries and benefits for not just police officers, but for their garbage workers, for their secretaries, for everybody. They were trying to make sure that they didn't increase wages. And it became apparent during these negotiations that Chicago was in this situation and was facing a significant budget crunch and shortfall, and the union's salary requirements or salary requests were not going to happen. The union boss, he said, "Hey, they can't give us the money that we want. We're going to get them to pony up." And this is the Fraternal Order of Police, which is the union over the Chicago PD. Well, the beat cops anyway today. So when they told them they were going to pony up, they took concessions in disciplinary procedures. And once Chicago agreed to that, they have found it nearly impossible to revert back to the old system in which cops were held more accountable. It's hard to believe. The cops in the 70s were more accountable to their actions than the cops in the 90s. And that's just crazy. Many agreements, like I said, declare that officers have rights that normal suspects don't have. Some of the things that I found said that they can limit the length of interrogations. They can dictate what time the interrogation will happen. They can dictate how many interrogators they're allowed to have. And they can also demand that not only their attorney be present, but a union representative be present as well. And unlike civilians suspected of a crime, officers, like I said, are entitled to review all of this evidence before they even come in. So they know the entire case that they have against them before they come in for their questioning. And even if they're found culpable of something and they have some type of sanction, they can appeal that and demand an arbiter. In, of course, non-criminal cases, criminal cases, they still have a lot of rights and protections, but they can't appeal those to an arbiter, luckily. But even in the absence of definitive evidence, there's still reason to believe that the public should have more say in the development of police accountability mechanisms. There's these things that people have been trying to get passed for years called sunshine laws, and it's because the idea of these deals are being done in the dark and the people don't know about them, and it's true. There's no transparency as they negotiate their contracts. Many large cities, the contracts are available online, and you can go and view them. You can go and look at the Chicago PD's union contract. You can look at Los Angeles County's union contract, or the city of Los Angeles's union contract. New York City. You can look at a lot of these. You can see them, but it's after the fact. You don't get to see them before they sign them. You get to see them after they sign them. This is what they negotiated, and you can see that. But you don't get to be. There's no part and parcel of accountability to anyone except for the negotiators for the city are thinking about the city, not about the citizenry, about the city, and pretty much that bottom line, that financial requirement that they have and they have to fit within. And the union is looking out for their members, which is what a union is supposed to do. But in the case of when the union's position is one of power over not just the city, but over the citizenry, that's where that power is overstepped. For too long, the law has excluded the public from developing these procedures, and there's some people that have wanted to go and create what's the word I'm looking for? Go and create a civilian liaison position that looks out for the citizenry in these negotiations, but it has always been pretty much knocked down. In St. Louis, when Kim Gardner was elected the top prosecutor, she set out to rein in the high rate of police violence in the city, and she proposed a unit within the prosecutor's office that would independently investigate misconduct. And she ran smack dab into the wall of a powerful local police union that wasn't going to allow that to happen. The union pressured the local lawmakers to set aside the proposal, and it was never brought to a vote. At the same time, lawyers from the union waged legal fights to limit the availability or the ability of the prosecutor's office to even investigate police misconduct. And the following year, the union boss said that the DA should be removed from office, by force or by choice is what he said. And by force, he meant voting choice. Voting force. He didn't mean, actually go out and shoot or anything. But often politicians attempting to cross these police unions have feared being labeled as being soft on crime, or when Steve Fletcher in Minneapolis, he was a city councilman when he was wanted to divert money away from hiring police officers toward a newly created office called the Violence Prevention Office. The police stopped responding to 911 calls placed in his jurisdiction of his constituents. Not responding, but didn't do it as quickly as they used to. And a few days after the Minneapolis charged an officer with the murder of Jeff Floyd, the president of the police union actually denounced political leaders, accusing them of selling out the police officers without due process. The union chief there, his name is Bob Kroll. He wrote in a letter to union members that it's despicable behavior, and that that protesters were a terrorist movement that were anti-cop. These are not the actions of officers. These are actions of their unions. And because of that, I think it's time to remove this process from the shadows and let people in on the negotiations so we can make them more accountable to the community, not just accountable to the city that they serve, like the city hierarchy. It isn't all cops are bastards. It's not ACAB. It's really APUAE. All police unions are evil. But that's about all. We'll see you guys tomorrow, and be good to each other.